Hello, everyone. I'm Tom Pounder, and this is the Digital in 5 show. This is where I take 5 minutes to talk about digital tools or trends that are happening around the world and apply it into our ministry context. And today we're going to talk about the question, do you really need an app? Okay, so back in the day when apps became very popular, the first kind of iterations of apps, there was that phrase that said, there's an app for that. You know, any kind of question or any thought or anything that you wanted or needed, there was always an app that will help you answer that question. And so, churches then naturally kind of migrated here and said, you know what, if there's an app for that, there should be an app for the churches. And there's different ways that churches use the apps over time. Well, now it seems like there's a lot of churches that have apps, and some of them are quite effective, and some of them are not quite as effective. Well, recently I went on a student ministry trip, and the conference itself had an app. And we thought initially this was awesome, this was fantastic, this was a great thing to have happen. But we came to realize that, you know what, just because you can have an app doesn't mean you need to have an app. And that was the case for this conference. We didn't really need an app. Sure, was it great to get rid of some of the paper stuff that they kind of threw in a bag and everything, and you could just download this app? Yes. But it was really kind of clunky. And so I'm just going to kind of go over a few different things that as you're thinking about whether or not you should do an app for your church or for your ministry or even for your conference, is having an app the best thing? And so I'm just going to go down a few different things that you should consider. One is cost. Some of these great apps out there cost a lot of money. Apps are not cheap anymore, and so you have to put a lot of money into it. So is it really worth it for you to have a really good app? Now you're thinking, well, I can go cheap on it. Well, yeah, you could go cheap, but then it's clunky. Sometimes there's ads in it. And in the case of this conference, this was a very generic app, which it had a bunch of different events on it, so our students could actually find different events that were not our events in this, and some of them probably were not the most appropriate events for our students to be looking at. And so you have to really figure in costs. Again, if you go higher in price, you're going to spend a lot of money and you're going to have that perfect product that you want. But if you go lower in price and need to do something on the cheap, it's probably not the best to get an app for that particular product or for that particular event or ministry that you're doing it for. The second thing you need to consider is it effective for your demographic? Okay, for instance, we were doing this for a student ministry event, and there was events from 8 a.m. all the way up until midnight. Well, one thing this conference didn't really consider was screen time limitations and app restrictions that parents put on the phones. Now you're thinking, well, geez, teenagers are going to want to have an app on their phone because they can just check their phone at any time and know where to go and what to be doing. The problem is parents put on screen time restrictions and they cut off certain apps, and you can't download certain apps because of age restriction. So that's another thing to be considering. Is it the right fit for this event? Well, you have to take in screen time considerations for that. And lastly, is it worth the investment of time? Okay, so in order to put an app together, you're going to have extra time that you're going to need to put into it. And so is it worth it in regards to time considerations? Do you have all the people getting the information to where it needs to go and have the right people putting it in, plugging and playing it in the right format? So you really have to consider that as well into it. So the bottom line of it is an app the right thing for your ministry or for your event? You have to factor in these three considerations. Now, they're not the only three. I'm sure there's other considerations that I miss. So if you have another consideration that you're thinking about when you're choosing to get an app for your ministry or church or not, put it in the comment section below or hit me up on Twitter at @TA Pounder. I would love to continue this conversation because, again, I think in an ideal world, yes, an app would be great, but there's so many factors that you have to consider in deciding whether or not it's really a good investment of time and money, and whether it's good for your students or those that you're ministering to as well. All right, heroes, well, that wraps it up for another episode of the Digital in 5 show. If you liked it, subscribe to it. Again, you can go to YouTube, subscribe to it, Spotify, iTunes. There's lots of different ways that you can subscribe to it. Just click on the show notes, and there's all the links there. I would love for you to continue to connect on a weekly basis for the Digital in 5 show. And as always, you're going to find all this content. You can go to ymsidekick.com. All right, heroes, well, I hope you have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you next time for an all-new show.